Please like and subscribe, everybody.
Yeah.
Please comment if you feel so inclined. But yeah, please subscribe because it would really help us defeat the algorithms
Mm-hmm.
and resist censorship. Not that we're targeted because we're so small, but the first one I'm just to talk about briefly is probably the first werewolf character that I got into as a kid. Suddenly became a live action character just within the last year. So that's Jack Russell. So who was created by the aforementioned Roy Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
He even told me about it one time on the phone. He was like, "Well, I was a teenage werewolf, and I wanted to kind of update it with like a hippie era teenager, and when I finally got the Essential Werewolf by Night collection, I had forgotten how young Jack Russell was actually supposed to be. How young a lot of these characters were. As soon as they become adult, they go into their supernatural, mode. Like Danny
Right.
Hellstrom, I think, was no older than 20 in that first Ghost Rider, which is, he seems so much older because he's has that bearing to him. But um, Jack Russell, though, yeah, he does seem younger, and then he has a younger sister, Lisa, spelled with two S's, that he was always dreading when the curse would spread to her. And so I won't get into the whole origin of the character because the adaptation doesn't get into the origin of the character, but it does, in my opinion, portray the character perfectly. And better yet, it portrays a character I like even more, who's not a werewolf, but it's a monster. Um, but yeah, and the funny thing is, Keith was talking about the Beast Must Die, but the Werewolf by Night show, it was on Disney Plus, and it
Mhm.
was shot in black and white, and the titles were supposed to emulate, the Universal era of monsters and of
Right.
filmmaking. And of course, that also it was gory, so black and white helped them get away with that with Disney. And but how do I put this? I was gonna say, um, it was it was interesting. First of all, they cast Gail Garcia Bernal, who's been in a bunch of great Spanish movies, including some of the great Almodovar films. And I've always liked him. I haven't seen him in that many films other than Almodovar. So I thought that was cool. Good out of the box casting. Marvel is good at that, or generally good at that, I think. Um, but the plot is similar to The Beast Must Die in a way because it's not who's the werewolf, but it's like basically where's the monster, until you realize
Mhm.
that, they brought all these monster hunters together. And most of them are characters created for the show. Some of them are from the comics. Uh, and they're summoned to the castle of Ulysses Bloodstone, who in the comic books was an immortal monster hunter who passed away in the 20th century. And his daughter got his bloodstone, which kept him immortal. He was a caveman. He got it that long ago.
Mhm.
Um, and so they changed it a little. Instead of making him immortal, they made him the most recent to die of a long line of characters who passed this bloodstone down. And Bloodstone looks exactly like it does in the comic books. And his daughter Elsa Bloodstone is there when as they're gathered together to kind of give his mantle and give the Bloodstone to one of the monster hunters who can find the monster that they let loose within their maze or whatever. And the stepmother character played by this really obnoxious comedian. She always plays like terribly unlikable characters. I forgot her name, but um, she wasn't in the comics, but she's kind of administering all of it,
Mhm.
and she hates Elsa, has disowned her. So it's like kind of ridiculous. It's like, why don't you just give it to Elsa? I mean, her name is Bloodstone, hello, but she hates her so much, she goes to all this trouble to make sure she doesn't get it. And but she doesn't realize how incredible a fighter Elsa is and how resourceful she is going through this maze. And after a while, she kind of allies herself with the monster hunter, ostensible monster hunter played by uh, um, Gail Garcia Bernal. But um, we find out eventually that he's not a monster hunter, and um, so Elsa's a little freaked, feels a little betrayed, and they've pretty much decided. I mean, she killed a couple of the monster hunters, and uh, they pretty much decided, fuck it, we're just gonna murder her and we're just going to murder this guy too. He's an imposter. And they kind of, what tips off the stepmother is the bloodstone glows. I don't know why it didn't earlier, but for some reason she wields it at this point in the movie when it's advantageous, and it shows that Jack is a monster himself, but he doesn't look like a monster. But she knows immediately where's a werewolf. I can't remember if they call him a werewolf yet, but obviously she knows he is because they cage him, and to get Elsa killed off, they cage her with him, assuming he'll kill him. And so they actually they don't go into his cycles of transformation, and they've changed different times over the years in the comics to where he eventually could also do like the Howling thing, where he could change at will and became more of an overtly heroic character. But in the ones I was growing up with, he always the full moon. But in this case, the stepmother forces him to transform using the bloodstone, and it's pretty incredible. They do it in silhouette, and especially with the black and white version, it's really cool. And he looks exactly like the Werewolf by Night.
Yeah,
he's more of a wolf man. He's like the Larry Talbot kind of werewolf. And they didn't change that. In the comics, Bill Sienkiewicz changed it to make him look more like the Howling Werewolf. And whereas I do prefer that design, I didn't feel like they should have just made up another character. But anyway, because I got used to Jack Russell looking a certain way, so it was a thrill to see like a live action. He even had ends up with just the pants on and the belt. And he jumps in the same way. I mean, most all of the werewolf shots in the show are directly from Mike Klug panels from the comic.
Yeah.
And I sat and compared a bunch of them when I did a video on it at the time. And, my thumbnail was I compared the comics, the characters from the comics to how they looked in the show. But the real treat to this was that one they pulled off even better visually was the monster who they're actually were supposed to be finding in the labyrinth, and that was the Man-Thing. And in this funny twist, which I thought was beautiful. Jack is portrayed as this really sweet guy, and he's friends with Man-Thing, and Man-Thing comes through the bushes, and he like pats him and tries to hug him. He's like, "Hey!" And it was like so realistic, like this is really his buddy. And I was like, this guy's such a great actor. And and that Man-Thing, he looks exactly like the character. I mean, and it's incredible the way he
they did both of them right.
Yeah, they're brilliant. And the only difference is he's a little more intelligent, quite a bit more intelligent than the Man-Thing is in the comics. He's not really vocal, but he kind of like grunts, and he kind of like communicates with Jack. Now, I mean, they never indicate whether he'd be able to be understood by anybody else. Maybe not, but
it's kind of a monstrous George and Lenny kind of
relationship.
I loved it. But again, that's one of those. I grew up with those exact iterations of those characters, and they're imprinted on me. So when I saw the two of them in those scenes, I'm just like starting to tear up. So just like, this is so fucking amazing. So and it did really well, which I didn't expect that to do well on Disney Plus. And a lot of people rightly have said it's one of the greatest things that MCU have done, and I totally agree. And they re-released it on Halloween this past year in color, and it looked great.
That was great too. Yeah,
and they didn't censor the gore. I mean, so kudos to them.
I equated that with somebody who was complaining about him adding the color. As I said, I'm kind of equating it to those times that Marvel had like those black and white magazines for the horror lines, and then later would take the story and publish it in a comic book, and they would add color to it. It's like it's no different than
and that. those characters did appear in some of those magazines.
Exactly, they should.
And the other thing I equated the color to was if you see the black and white version as a universal, I saw the color as like a Hammer thing because it's very bright and saturated.
The blood was very saturated.
So I was So anyway, that's my first werewolf, Jack Russell. Yay! He's a movie star finally.
Yay!
Yeah. So Bill, do you have time to do your last one?
Yeah. I just I guess I'll do Dog Soldiers.
Don't
oh boy.
Sounds
No, Dog Soldiers is great. I love the design. So if you haven't seen it, watch it. It's by Neil Marshall, who really should do more stuff. I know his last film was probably the Hellboy remake, and that was an unpleasant experience for everybody, including him.
I didn't like
Ouch.
Centurion. I thought I would love it, but I
Yeah.
couldn't get through it.
And
But The Descent
Doomsday
is good.
Descent is great.
Yeah.
And he did two of the best episodes of Game of Thrones. Two of the
Oh, okay.
biggest episodes.
Which ones?
He did the Battle of Blackwater.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And he did the battle where the Northmen attacked the wall.
Oh, that's such a good one.
So
Yeah.
both of those are kind of unique because they're two of the few episodes that take place entirely in one place. There's no switching around.
Yeah.
Just good. I mean, he's a good director, and this is a low budget movie, but it looks good.
Oh yeah.
The werewolf designs are great, but here's where he's smart. Werewolves are hard to pull off. It's very difficult to do a costume that doesn't look like a mascot. Or if you use CGI, it looks like CGI.
Yes.
100%. Watch. You could spend a great deal of money, like they did in Van Helsing, and hair doesn't work well. I guess if you spend Avatar kind of money, you can make it work. But who has that? Certainly not them when they made Dog Soldiers. So they had a good design, but like any werewolf costume, if you see it too much, it probably will quickly reveal itself as a costume. So you don't show it too much. It's nighttime. Use a little bit of editing, some low key lighting, backlighting, things that help disguise any flaws that you have. Do that. I honestly don't know.
Common sense as a filmmaker.
It's common sense, and yet
As a
I see it a lot. I see it a lot when filmmakers, when special effects people do their own films, they linger way too long on the special effects. That's a constant thing. Yeah. But this is good, a good story. We got a bunch of soldiers, British soldiers, who are investigating some murders and find themselves besieged by werewolves. It's aliens with werewolves.
And they're in Scotland.
Which is scary anyway. And of course, then we start getting shenanigans. Turns out that the military was involved trying to capture a werewolf to use for, boy, that's a dumb plan. I'm pretty sure in the history of humankind, people have like put tigers in cages and brought them right up to the front and then opened the cage, and the tigers ran out and did an immediate U-turn and went right back into the army that sent them and started tearing things up. And they're like, well, that was a stupid idea. Using a wild animal like a werewolf soldier, you're going to hand him a gun, he's going to throw it to the ground and tear your throat out. Hey, I just want to say, okay, so in World War II, the Nazis, who trained dogs to carry bombs against the Russians, that they would run at a tank, get under the tank, and explode. And how you train a dog to do this? I guess they use fake bombs at first, otherwise
they did that really a little bit in Vietnam too.
Yeah. So what happened is they trained the dogs to do this. They thought it was going to work, and then in an actual battle they did this, but in the practice they weren't being shot at by Russian soldiers.
Right.
So the dogs ran out, started getting shot at, and ran back to the safety of their masters, where unfortunately but fortunately a lot of Nazis got blown up. Just a bad plan. But anyway, that's the military always looking for an edge, and they decide to go capture these werewolves. We've got them. They're stuck in a small. It's very Night of the Living Dead-esque. We're stuck in a house, and we don't know exactly who to trust. Trust nobody. There's the moral there. Especially with werewolves, you can't trust people if you're in a werewolf movie. No. Anyone could be a werewolf. There's a whole game called Who's the Werewolf? So if you find yourself in a werewolf movie, you're minding your own business, doing your podcast or whatever, and suddenly werewolves are a real thing, you immediately have got to cross everyone off your list, even grandma. You don't know. You don't know who's been bitten.
Right.
Well, Red Riding Hood can tell you.
But this is just a fun movie. It does not skimp on the gore. And I like like I said, I like the design. I like the man body wolf head. I think that's a cool look, especially if you can manage to trick the feet so that they get that bendy thing with the leg extensions, which must be a nightmare to run. I've seen some cosplayers do it, and it looks great. And I'm pretty sure they spend the next 2 weeks soaking their feet in Epsom salts because it just cannot possibly be any fun.
Humans aren't meant to jump on their hind feet like animals.
Just a ripping good yarn and a great way to show that with a limited budget, not a lot of sets, but some good imagination and a good creative mind behind it, you can get a lot out of it. If you like action, if you loved Aliens, you'll love Dog Soldiers. I can't imagine, and I've never heard anyone dislike Dog Soldiers. It's just a fun movie. I want to go watch it again now.
It kind of came out of nowhere when it came out, and then I just read one review of it, and I bought the DVD because the day it came out, because I stocked DVDs at Borderson, and I was like, oh yeah, okay, Werewolves is supposed to be okay, but I hadn't talked to anybody who'd seen it, didn't know anybody who'd seen it. I loved it immediately. I was pretty riveted, and I've so much.
And then he did The Descent. So I mean, again, I hope he returns and makes some new stuff. And
absolutely,
I like his style. I like the way he does things, even if the movies aren't always successful. I mean, Hellboy, the new Hellboy was not going to be successful. It was doomed. It was doomed from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
So what can you do? Now, the other film I was going to do is Wolf, and I really would like to talk about that, but I really do have to go. So, Henry, I know you're a big Wolfen fan, so if you want to take that and run with it.
Well, I think Keith's got it right.
Well, we can talk about it. The two of us can talk about it.
We'll have a discussion about it, but we'll miss you.
Yeah, it's good. It's it's the one thing I did. I was on a podcast with the director, not the original director, but the guy who was kind of called in to fix it once the original director was shuffled off. And I saw it opening day. I really enjoyed it, but boy, did it just stiffed at the box office.
So Wadley didn't finish the film? I didn't know that.
I think he was given the ability to put in his cut, and then they thanked him for his services and changed the locks on the doors, and brought in the guy who did Let's Scare Jessica to Death to supervise any reshoots or re-editing, and they really screwed around with it. So
you saw it in the theater. It's beautiful to look at.
Yeah,
gorgeous.
And it's one of those. It was during the time period in which if I was into a movie, I went and I got the novelization. And read that, and so I read the Wolfen novel also. So, and I would usually read it before I even saw the movie. So I would go into the movie, already got it. Right. And so I would get backstory and undercurrents and stuff. So yeah, it was an interesting experience.
Yeah.
We'll share.
Anyway, thank you. Yeah, so I'll look forward to watching this myself. And
okay, buddy.
You all take care. Kaylin, take care.
Thank you. Have a good night, Bill.
Bye-bye.
Take care. So I guess next is indeed Kaylin before we wade into
alrighty
segment.
All right. So I talked about the first two of the Ginger Snaps films. And then for the third one, which is a prequel and a very, very different film from the other two, we'll go into that one for my final pick for this week. So obviously I'm only talking about the two characters of Ginger and Bridget Fitzgerald. But since I covered 3 films and I'm dealing with a lot right now, I thought that was pretty reasonable. So,
well, technically you're dealing with 4 characters.
Okay, well, technically, if you go with that particular interpretation, which is my favorite interpretation. So
good, it's mine too.
All right, but the Fitzgerald Sisters. So let's just say that. So the first 2 films are about these modern contemporary teenage girls who live in the early 2000s. This one is a prequel. It's called The Beginning, and it gets into who might be them from the past or might be ancestors of theirs. They don't really make it explicit. Going through the situation of becoming werewolves together, very similar to what we see in the first 2 movies, except the circumstances are very, very different. So what's going on is this is set in the 1800s, and there's like trading going on in North America, like northern North America, in the wilderness.
They're in Canada.
There's Canada. Oh, Canada, cool.
Because they're near the Hudson Bay Company.
Whether it was the United States or Canada, and I wasn't 100% sure.
Yeah, no, it's Canada.
Yeah,
Yeah.
northern North America.
I'll get on your nerves because that's one I researched to death.
That's fine. I
Okay.
appreciate that you know more than I do because I mostly talk about stories and like social commentary stuff. So those details do not stick in my brain very well.
I understand.
So yes. So there's basically like a trading post type of situation with Canadian folks. And so these two girls are out in the wilderness. They've gotten lost. They're scared. There's like stuff in the woods that is very, very terrifying. And they meet this native woman who is grieving the loss of her sister, it seems, and she tells them about a prophecy, or starts to tell them about a prophecy. The details are a little unclear at this time. And it has to do with the two of them basically having some sort of problem, and then one of them is supposed to kill the other one. And she gives them these bird skull necklaces that you see them wearing throughout all of the films. They have them in the other two as well. And that was never really explained in the first two, so it's just like, oh, that's kind of cool. They're like weird and they collect skulls or something. I collect skulls, I understand, you know? But then, you know, you get this situation, and it's just like, oh, so that's where they got those from. Okay, that's kind of cool. Why are they in the 1800s? This is weird. That was kind of my experience watching this. And yes, so they come upon this trading post after being attacked by, gosh, a werewolf, I guess. And they make it over there. They're fine. The people there are torn on whether to take them in or not. There's one guy who's just like, no, don't, you're going to doom us all, we're all gonna die, they're outsiders, we cannot trust them. And the guy who's in charge there is just like, it's fine, we need to let them see the doctor, he needs to treat them, one of them is wounded, come on, let's like be human and humane about this. So they go see the doctor. Bridget is the one who is injured, and the doctor puts some leeches on her wounded area. And there's all this business with like Chekhov's rifle going on over here. I've started referring to everything that becomes significant at some point as Chekhov's whatever the object is.
Oh God.
Yeah, I drive my loved ones in film watching people crazy with this because they're just like, will you please shut up about Anton Chekhov? No, I will not. This happens always. So he's like kind of like getting this rifle prepared, taking the safety on and off and stuff, and it's just like, what's going on here? It's kind of weird, but he seems to calm down about it, and it's like, okay, fine, bleaches are going to do their job, they're going to clean any of the crud out of the wound. Terrible.
Good old leeches.
Yes,
maggots will do it
good
better.
old leeches, which I am
Yeah.
absolutely terrified in real life. I do not swim in lakes for that reason. They're scary. Do not like them. But and neither does Bridget for that matter. She's like, don't those things touch me, please. And Ginger's trying to take care of her and be like, it's okay, you know, you got to do the thing. So all of that's going on. There's, you know, it's kind of like a little bit of a mystery setup almost. It's just like, oh, like this group of men from this trading post went missing, we don't know what's going on with that. The guy who's kind of the leader of this group has a native woman who is his wife. I'm also being very vague about what tribe these folks are because they don't tell you anywhere in the film, which actually is a very big pet peeve of mine.
Well, it actually does help you interpret it the way I did, because it gives you a lot of leeway to what tribes were in Canada at that time, and also fictional North American Indians at that time.
They do. And that's better than nothing. And also with some of the folklore stuff that I'm about to talk about, you can narrow it down a little bit more from there, but it still bothers me that they don't actually give any specific identity, because that's really not optimal representation wise. So that's one of my pet peeves, and especially like older films and literature and things like that. Anyway, so he has a native wife and sons, and the like, I guess, like reverend, preacher, pastor. I never know religious clergy titles unless somebody actually says them. They don't really make it obvious. And I don't know, guy who does like all of the hell and brimstone ceremony stuff that people
Right.
did in the 19th century,
Of course. Yeah.
is just like, hey, you brought sin here by like planting your seed. God, I hate that in this woman and having these children who are like biracial and stuff. It's disgusting and just bleh, hate this guy. And also he's
You're
very,
not
very
the only
distrusting.
you're not the only one who doesn't understand all that.
Yeah.
Most movie makers don't. And so they
And that's
want,
why it's
and
vague.
that's why
Often.
it's vague. They just
I mean,
know put
there
on
are ways to figure it out if
Yeah.
you're like
But
used to getting
generally,
about
if
Yeah, but
they're,
I know nothing.
yeah,
I'm
Oh,
also
that's
bad
fine.
at this in real life.
but
Like,
I'm
oh,
just
somebody's
saying,
preaching in front of everybody. Hey, you're a person
Right.
who's preaching in
be-
front of everybody. Unless I know the
because
denomination, I have no idea what's
yeah,
going on.
because I happen to know about that stuff,
Yeah, me
it's one
too.
of those things that happens in movies. It just
Yeah.
sticks
The
out like
writers
a
don't
sore
know.
thumb to me when I can tell when the guy making the movie knows something or doesn't.
Right.
And so yeah, your confusion, if you're confused, it's probably because the filmmaker doesn't know either. And
That's legit. That's
they're just
legit.
using a generic religious person, probably with a clerical
Generic
column.
religious
Fire and
person,
brimstone.
fire
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
brimstone preaching,
Mean.
sinners in the
Yeah.
hands of an angry God,
Yeah.
all that
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah.
Even though that's an earlier sermon than when the film is set.
Burn the
You know,
witch.
the Puritans kind of affected everything on this continent forever. So that's fun.
Yeah, they kind of
Uh,
ruined a lot of shit.
except in the parts that were colonized by the Spanish, then it's Catholics. But anyway, I
Good
digress.
point. Yeah.
Anyway, so he's also very distrustful of Ginger and Bridget. He's just like, who are these girls? They are dangerous and all of that. Also, they're sinners. Screw them. Really, really fun. So ultimately what ends up happening, like major plot points wise, is this guy's son is one of the folks who's been bitten by the werewolves from the outside. He's a child. He is kept inside and away from everybody. The guy says that his kid was killed by one of those, and that's why he's very careful and doesn't want anybody just going out there. And that's also why he wants to take the girls in, is because he wants to protect them from the same fate. However, the kid is definitely not dead. The kid has definitely been bitten and is definitely turning into one of them. Ends up biting Ginger. Very similar situation to what happens in the first film. And that's where the prophecy comes in. So basically you get the situation where it's like, okay, something bad's going to happen. One of the sisters ends up killing the other. It's vague about which one. But having seen the first film, if you started with the first film, unlike Henry, who started with the prequel, you're just like, oh, this is probably alluding to the fact that eventually Bridget ends up having to kill Ginger because she's too far gone. What'd you say?
Right.
It works in both directions.
It does, actually, and that's
opinion.
really interesting about the way that this goes. Because
I have a friend who had a theory about the prophecy thing and
yeah.
How it tied into the first two. But go ahead.
Yeah. And we'll definitely get there because I'm so actually psyched to talk about like the prophecy and like what's going on, what connects the films and all of that, because there's some interesting theories about it. So okay, and there's this other native guy who is a hunter.
Hunter. And that's his name.
Oh, that is actually his name.
That's the only name that character has. Again, the writer was pretty lazy.
Okay, gotcha.
Because I needed to research the Indian characters to tie things together, and it's like I just decided his name is Hunter. Just go with it, Hunter.
Oh my God, yeah.
No, when he was
fine.
born,
I mean, it's the only thing he ever gets called, so I guess that makes sense.
His father saw a hunter running by and said, "I call you Hunter."
That sounds like some racist shit. Anyway,
definitely on the ignorant scale.
Yes, quite. Yeah, so that's super fun. Love it, hate it. Anyway, he is from the same community as the woman who kind of started to tell the sisters this prophecy earlier, and he ends up helping them escape, find her, learn the full prophecy from her. So they do that, and she has Bridget take this medicinal drug that basically puts her in this like weird dream like situation where she's supposed to see a vision of her death in the future, because the assumption that the sisters are under is that Ginger is going to wolf out and end up killing Bridget. So then Bridget has this dream in which she sees the Hunter character about to kill Ginger. She goes in to attack him. He dodges, and she ends up stabbing Ginger in the chest instead. And she's horrified because she's like, oh my God, I'm the one who kills her. No, I don't want this. I'm not going to do that. She wakes up, and as it turns out, Ginger has in fact wolfed out and has killed the woman who told the prophecy. And Hunter is just like, yeah, that happened. You're gonna have to kill her. Sorry, that's the prophecy. You're screwed. Also during all of this, you find out, and this gets into the like, okay, but which tribe is this actually? Because the folklore situation that's going on is that they have this prophecy about the folklore creature, the Wendigo, being brought to them by the European colonizers. And the sisters come with them,
Hence
and
Ravenous.
they're tied in with that.
Yeah, that's what Ravenous is about, Wendigo.
Yes. Yeah. And so that's what's going on here. And so it ties into the folklore as well. So
It's
then
another creature that transforms.
Yes, there are a lot of similarities.
Some people call those theriomorphic
folklore-wise.
characters, but that's not exactly a correct definition of theriomorphic, but it'll work fine.
Right. And yeah, like you were starting to point out, there are a ton of similarities actually between the folklore of werewolves and the folklore of these beings as well. So that's how all of that ties in with the prophecy stuff. And so then it's like, all right, it's cool. So we've got these creatures that we've been colloquially calling werewolves. And then it's also these folkloric creatures from this continent, and this idea of these creatures, these beings, predates European contact altogether. It's a very, very old folkloric tradition.
Native thing.
Yeah, exactly. So they've been around forever. But then the way that it works in the lore of these films is that the Europeans brought the creatures to this continent, and the sisters are part of that. And it's all tied up. So, oh gosh, I've lost the plot a little bit in my head. Can you help me out here? Because I know you know this one super crazy well.
Well,
I know they end up ultimately going back to the trading post, but I'm just kind of blanking on like point A to point B.
I know that Hunter helps them a lot. He's actually seems like a pretty noble character, and I'm trying to think of where to go, as in to tell you what actually happened that I remember and what I'm speculating.
I'm trying to stick to just what we see on the screen and then get into,
because there's some implicit stuff with Ginger and Hunter that I think you can read a lot between the lines.
Right. Yeah, there is stuff with that going on.
And about the tribe.
Yeah.
Yeah, but go ahead. You're already opening a lot of the can of worms right there. So,
there's a big can of worms.
Yeah,
we can catch so many fish with these worms.
We know more about this movie than the guy who wrote it. the three of us. That's incredible. But go ahead.
My God. Gosh. All right. Anyway, whatever. It's fine. We'll pick up back at the trading post. So they go back to the trading.
I said it wouldn't be the first time, but go ahead.
Yeah, we're a bunch of nerds. Anyway, they go back to the trading post. Hunter and Bridget do, because Bridget is she still wants to save her sister and find some way to prevent either of them from getting killed. And ultimately she goes back. Everybody is like furious about the situation because they find out that the leader's son is one of the werewolves or Wendigos or whatever it is that you want to refer to these creatures as. Furious about that, furious about the girls, see them as harbingers of death, basically. And
because they're women. Because they're women. More metaphors. Come on.
Because they're
that's
women.
How I read it.
Yeah. It's all like gender based like stuff. Anyway, our vague religious leader guy, Fire and Brimstone man, decides to burn Bridget at the stake, which is fantastic. Now we're getting into witchcraft shit, which is super fun. He literally actually calls them witches as well. So that's also getting into all of this
He's an
gender-based
idiot.
oppression stuff. He is an idiot.
He can't even tell his monsters apart. Fuck
He
him.
can't even tell his monsters apart. Not that witches are monsters. Witches are
No, but
perfectly
you
cool.
know, creature,
Speaking
his
as one.
supernatural beings.
Yes.
Get with it, dude.
Get with it, dude. Yeah. So the lesson here is that vague religious people don't know shit. Anyway.
Right. I think that is actually an intentional one of the few intentional.
It really is. No, this guy's
Yeah.
just kind of he has no idea what's going on with any of
Right.
this. He's just preaching and preaching and preaching. It's like all of this is evil, and if we burn her, everything is going to be fine. No, it's not. So Ginger swoops in to basically save her sister like a badass. She's got this whole like amazing like Queen of the Werewolves thing going on. She has this awesome cloak suddenly and just I don't know, she just acts like this just absolute badass in the scene, and it's so cool. And she's like, right, I'm here to save my sister, like fuck you guys. And she ends up like summoning the werewolves from the forest to just come in and start mauling the shit out of everybody who is possibly going to be a danger to her or Bridget. It is so cool. And then the time comes when Bridget is supposed to, according to her vision, kill her sister, and she won't do it. I forgot an important part of the prophecy. I just realized that I literally did not bring up. Oh my God. I can't see, this is an ADHD problem. I cannot like relay all of this stuff without being like, oh, and I forgot an important detail. So important detail. Another part of the prophecy is that they were supposed to kill the boy, which is super vague. Otherwise, one of the sisters will kill the other. They assume that is the werewolf
Child.
who bit Ginger. I have another theory also, which we'll get into in a second. So basically Ginger was like going to and could not bring herself to do it. Like, I'm not gonna just murder this kid. I can't. Which, you know, super valid. I don't know if I could either. That's awful. Granted, very different from the future Ginger who is just like, I'll do whatever I have to do, man. I don't care. I'm an angsty teenager.
Right.
This version is a little bit more pure-hearted, I feel.
Well, they're kin now.
Yeah.
They're both werewolves.
Yeah.
Not all altruisms.
Well, no, but
I mean, it is altruism, but you know what I'm saying. It's
right.
I can't kill one of my kind, you know. Whatever.
Right. I mean, I also took that as like just innocence, you know, because like he also is a child. It's not like it was like an adult who like, I don't know.
No, you're right.
Anyway, so that was part of it. So then basically same situation here now where it's like Bridget cannot bring herself to kill Ginger, even though Ginger is, you know, at this point dangerous. And so she just can't do it. So instead what happens is they end up killing the Hunter character. And so that's actually why my interpretation is a little bit different. I think that the prophecy was actually referring to him, which is how I interpreted it when I first heard it, because he was the one who would come between the sisters. And so they did end up killing him. They didn't kill the child, and that did prevent one of them from having to kill the other.
Did they kill him?
Or did they kill him?
But go ahead.
Yeah, no. God, can of worms is enormous. But anyway. And then basically the film ends with the two of them, you know, out in the snow. They clasp hands. It becomes the blood oath, thereby also infecting Bridget with this werewolf causing parasite. And they say together forever. And credits. So it's really beautiful. It like comes full circle within itself as a film. It comes in full circle with the first two films. And it's like a very similar story, but it ends differently from how the first film ends and then the sequel, where in this case they actually get to live together as werewolves. One of them did not.
I think that's a case where they're not punished for being werewolves.
Right. Which also has like all of this like feminist shit in it. Like, God, I love these films so
there's
much.
a reason. I mean, there's a reason, you know, the forces that destroy them in the Ginger in the first movie, are forces that could destroy anybody and put in that
Mhm.
situation,
Right.
and can represent, like we were talking about, all those changes and adolescence and trauma and all this
Mhm.
stuff and
Yeah, it's
sexuality.
very much a coming of age movie at
But
the
I feel
same
like
time that it is a werewolf movie.
yeah, and I feel like Ginger in I will say this, and it might be only because I'm a bigger fan of this actress. I really feel like the movies are about Bridget more than Ginger.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
so
Bip,
too overall.
Bridget is like a kind of a nerdy goth girl, and I just kind of and during the time I was doing the same research, I actually, I tracked down Emily Perkins on her MySpace and followed her. I think I
Mhm.
sent her a couple of texts and she replied one time,
That's
and
cool.
because she was still young even then, in 2005. This was, I guess, 2006 at the latest, and
Hmm.
yeah,
I think
2005.
the
So
prequel came out in like '04, I want to
yeah,
say.
okay, this was
So,
2005. So Emily
mhm.
was trying, her career was kind of not really taking off, but her popularity was, and plus she had become an adult, and they were kind of encouraging her to have more of a sultry look, which I didn't like. I thought
Mhm.
she was gorgeous in the movies, but
Mhm.
she doesn't look that way now so much, and I'm gonna give her the benefit of the doubt that she didn't have any unneeded plastic surgery. Um, but you never know what the film industry will do to you or make you do. But
Mhm.
so I was really fascinated with it, kind of with her, but definitely with that. I was invested in that character, and I think especially in this movie, and really in the second also, though I didn't know that until later.
Mhm.
It falls to Bridget to try to solve this problem, whereas
Yeah.
Ginger is the one who gets the problem and goes with it.